Final part of the show today is going to be about the defense. And I really think this defense is going to be really good this season. And this is going to take on a little bit of a different tone than the offense did, because with the defense, the question is really not about, it's not initially about will they be good enough. It's kind of like, okay, are they going to just not take a step back? And will they regress? Like, is what we saw in year two more of what an Al Golden defense looks like than what we saw in year one? I think that it is. And I could sit here and make an hour-long case for why that is, but I think we all understand it. The longer you're in a system, the more comfortable you're with it, the better you're going to play. And when you have a defense filled with guys that are all learning the same exact defense new together, you don't have the leadership and the veteran experience in place. Experience doesn't matter as much. It didn't matter that J.D. Bertrand was a 2-year starter, or actually a full-year starter from the year before. It didn't matter that Isaiah Foskey was coming off X number of sacks the year before. It was all new. It was all new to him. And of course, we go into year two, and it's some of the same players, but you lost Foskey, you lost the Adamiolas, you lost Tariq Bracy, you lost Brandon Joseph, you lost some good football players, but guys knew what they were doing, and they were able to step in and overcome those losses and still be a really, really good defense. So I expect them to be better, or to be at the very least as good. Now, then the question becomes, okay, they at least were able to maintain what they were. Is there room that they can get better? And I don't mean statistically, because unless you rank number one in the country in every category, there's always room to statistically get better. What I'm more referring to is, do they have the ability to get better? Not in theory can they be better, but do they have the resources to be better? Are they talented enough to be better? Do they have the depth to be better? Does the coaching know how to kind of push the buttons to get them better? That part I think is accurate. I think they can do that. But what we're going to find out this year is, when will we get to the point that we find out if Notre Dame has the talent to be even better on defense? And that's what we're going to find out. And then the other thing that I kind of have is, this is a really unique makeup of this football team. And this is what I said in the 88 versus 2024 post. By the way, Pat O'Doherty, we'll do score predictions next Thursday. Thursday is the day that we do predictions for games. And we'll have a whole show about it. It's going to be a lot of fun. But when you look at this defense and you compare it to 88, one of the things I loved about that 88 team is you had these really good veteran players. Wes Pritchett was a veteran. Frank Stamms was a veteran. Pat Terrell was a veteran. I think he was a junior, right? Stance Magala, I think, was a junior. You had Jeff Alm, I believe, was a veteran player. They had a lot of veteran players in that team. Ned Bolkar was an All-American the year before. He was another veteran. But you also had this mix of some really talented younger players. George Williams was a younger guy. Todd Light was a sophomore. Andre Jones was, I believe, a sophomore, or maybe even a freshman. Arnold Ali was a young player on that team. You had this really nice blend of George Streeter was a veteran player. You had this really nice blend of really good, gritty veterans. Chris Zorich was a redshirt freshman on that team in 1988, I believe. I think he was an 80 member of the 87 class. So you had these really veteran players that were, Frank Stamms was so important in that 1988 team. And Wes Pritchett was so important to that football team in 1988. But then you had these talented players that were, Michael Stonebreaker was a junior in college, but he missed the year before. He was really his first full year as a starter. Redshirt sophomore kind of player. So you had these really high talent, really good Todd Light, future first-round pick, Chris Zorich, future second-round pick, these really talented younger players to mix with those veterans. Well, that's kind of similar to what Notre Dame has right now. This gap that they have between the top and the bottom experience-wise is unlike something I've really ever seen, and a lot of it's because of COVID. If it's not for COVID, Riley Mills and Howard Cross are in the NFL right now. RJ Open's in the NFL right now. They don't have the eligibility to come back. Jack Kaiser's in the NFL right now. Xavier Watts is in the NFL right now. Actually, no, Xavier would have another year left because he redshirted his first year. I believe Jordan Clark would be in the NFL right now. So you're in this huge situation where you've got a sixth-year senior at will linebacker. You've got a 6-year senior at nose tackle, a 5th-year senior at defensive tackle, a 5th-year senior at defensive at Viper. You have a 6-year senior at end. You have a 5th-year senior at one safety spot, a 5th-year senior at the other safety spot. And then you have mixed in with those guys up front, a redshirt freshman that they're expecting big things from in Boubacar, a redshirt sophomore they're expecting things in Josh Burnham, a true freshman in Bryce Young they're expecting things from. Armel Mookham's had a great camp. He's a redshirt freshman. Donovan Heinisch is a redshirt sophomore. He's a young guy. Drake Bowen is expected to be starting linebacker as a sophomore, true sophomore. His primary backup and a guy that's going to play a ton and push him all year is Kingston Villalmas, who's an elite true freshman. Jalen Sneed's a redshirt sophomore. Jaden Osbury's a redshirt freshman, and you've got Adon Schuler's a redshirt freshman. You've got these really Christian Grace, a true sophomore, and then there's like the only like true junior in the whole mix is like Benjamin Morrison. You know what I mean? Like it's a really interesting mix of these really older veteran players, and then there's this big drop off in experience, and then there's all these really talented younger players. It reminds me a lot of the Lou Holtz team, and it makes sense. Not because, it's a great coach and they're going to win it. But it's when you have a coach that's taking over, you're going to have some natural losses from some of the in-the-middle guys that they depart, or maybe they weren't good enough or they didn't buy in. And so you've got those veteran players that are totally bought in, right? Mills, Cross, Watts, Kaiser, guys like that, totally bought in, and they're still here. They didn't transfer. They didn't do this. They didn't do that. They're totally bought in. And then some of the guys in the middle that maybe weren't good enough, either transferred out or you just had complete recruiting misses. And so now that really good recruiting that happened with the new coach and Lou Holtz with Vinny Serrato and those guys, they did some really good recruiting his first couple of years. And then in 88, some of those guys were sophomores. They were really elite freshmen. And that 88 team had 2 true freshmen that were hugely impactful on that football team on offense, and Rocket Ismail and Derek Brown. Ricky Waters is a true sophomore, mixed in with a lot of Mark Greens and veteran players. And that's where kind of Notre Dame is on defense, where you've got these 5th and 6th-year guys that have been around for a while. They're totally bought in. And then the Marcus Freeman recruits are now coming up as the freshman and sophomore classes, and they provide the really elite level athleticism. And so it's fun to talk about, but my question now is, how do they mesh together? How does that youth and experience mesh together? And how does Al Golden handle that combination of youth in some areas and extreme experience in others? How does that impact what he can call, how they execute his calls? What can he put on their shoulders at certain positions? That's something I'm very curious to see how he does. And I would assume Al Golden has been in this position before, whether it's the NFL, whether it's you've got this 8-year veteran at linebacker and then you go recruit this, draft this rookie in the first or second round, you got to play him. I'm assuming he's been in those shoes. I know he's been in that situation in Miami. I know he's in that situation at times at Temple. And then, of course, I remember back when he had that great linebacker class at Virginia. Kai Parham was a 5-star guy. Ahmad Brooks was a 5-star guy. And he had some really talented young guys, but then a lot of really good older players too that you had to kind of blend them together. How does he do that? That's going to be interesting to see. Very curious to see how that goes. So those are all things that are going to factor into, okay, can this defense take that next step? To answer my own question, and I'm curious what you guys think, I do believe that Notre Dame has the talent on defense to be better this year. I think they're more athletic than they were a year ago. I think they're deeper than they were a year ago. I think that there's obviously more experience in the system and those type of things than they were a year ago. I think the young talent is ready to kind of emerge and show off the speed and length and athleticism that they focus so much on the recruiting trail. But it's going to be, can they put it all together? And that's really when I talk about, why I'm confident in this football team. I believe they have star power. You guys remember the show I did about the importance of star power. I don't need to reiterate that again. You got to have stars if you're going to have an elite defense. Defense much more than offense. That's one of the things that Brian Kelly said that was most accurate, honest, truthful thing he ever said was, he's like, look, I can generate offense schematically. On defense, you need dudes. And you can have a talented defense that stinks if it's not coached well. But a very well-coached defense that lacks talent is not going to be as good. And people say, well, what about Iowa? Iowa had talent. They just didn't have a highly ranked talent. But, Cooper DeJean was talented. Jack Campbell was talented. A lot of those defensive linemen that went to the NFL were talented. They just weren't highly ranked recruits. They're not putting 4.7s out there cornering, locking people down. You know what I mean? But you got to have dudes, but then those dudes have to be coached well. And when I look at this team, I think there's the star power. I think there's talent and depth of talent. In when you look at 2015, and I'd like to hear some feedback from you guys on this. I don't know that this Notre Dame team has quite the high level, top of the line talent that the 2015 team had. Meaning, I don't think there's a Jalen Smith on this football team. There's not a Will Fuller on this football team at wide receiver. Maybe there's a CJ Prosise. I think Jeremiah Love could be that. Jadarian Price could be that. There's not a Quentin Nelson on the offensive line. There's not a Ronnie Stanley probably on the offensive line. Maybe Gerby Lambert, but he's not there now. I'm talking about where they were at the time. And so I think the elite high level talent is not quite as good. The problem that team had was after you got past the top 5 guys, but even more so the depth. I mean, your defensive line in 15 had 4 guys that played in the NFL, started in the NFL on your defensive line, but the depth after that, major problem. Guys that shouldn't have been playing at the Power 5 level. This team may not have the individual high-level talent, but I think across the board, you could argue they have more advantages than that team. And when you look at the depth of talent, so they may not have a Jalen Smith, but they've got a Benjamin Morrison, they've got a Riley Mills, they've got a Howard Cross, they've got a Xavier Watts. You know what I mean? Like, so there's that level of talent, but there's no, with all due respect to him, there's no Joe Schmidt on this team. You know, there's no some of the defensive linemen that were playing as backups on that team. You're not relying on those type of players to be good at Notre Dame. You're not relying on Daniel Cage to be a difference maker for you. It's just a different type of situation than what you had back then. You've got more depth of talent. And I think that's something that has me very excited because you need that talent. They're fast, they're long. Those are important things in the modern age. And the other thing too is I believe this team has a chance to have an elite defensive line. I think right now, Bryan Smith and I were talking about this before the show. How would you rate the Notre Dame D-line right now? And I'd say they're definitely top 10. Are they top 5? That's more up for debate because the defensive ends aren't as good. So like, you know, A&M, they're good inside, maybe not elite inside, but pretty good inside, but they're elite on the edge. Ohio State, pretty good inside and out. There are some teams like that. Georgia, good inside and out. Notre Dame's elite inside. How good are they on the outside? Potentially they could be really good, but they got to prove it, right? So at the very least, they're top 10, easy top 10. The question is going to be, okay, can they be top 5? But either way, they're going to be an excellent defensive line. And that's certainly a great place to build a defense around. So that's a reason why I'm confident. And then the other thing, too, is Notre Dame has legit NFL talent in the secondary. Like legit NFL talent. It's not veteran guys that are smart, know what they're doing. There's legit NFL talent back there in the older class and the younger class. I don't know if Xavier Watts is a first-round draft pick or not, but he's an NFL player. I don't know if Rod Hurd's a day 2 NFL draft pick or not, but I know he's an NFL football player. I don't know if Benjamin Morrison's a high top 5 to 10 draft pick or a late first-round draft pick or even a day 2 draft pick, but I know he's an NFL football player. And you just kind of have that all around. And then Christian Gray is an NFL football player. I mean, he can't get there anytime soon, thank goodness, but he's an NFL football player. And there's other guys. I think Jaden Mickey can play in the National Football League. Maybe not as a starter, but certainly as a guy that could be a rotation player, maybe move to safety like Julian Love did. There's a lot of that type of talent in the secondary, and I think that's very important to make a run in today's game. I mean, you look at most of the teams that have won championships over the last 10 years, they had a lot of NFL football players in their secondary. Even teams that weren't necessarily great on defense had really good guys in the secondary. And to win in today's era, you've got to be able to line up and cover. You just do. And I think they have that. So those are all reasons why I'm really confident in this football team. Some concerns that I have. And number one is, obviously youth. Can the young guys pick up the defense and limit some of the mistakes? You don't want Drake Bowen and Kingston Villamasa and Jalen Sneed and Jaden Alsbury and some of those young guys with consistently making bad run fits and not being in the right place at the right time or not having the right timing, all that type of stuff. You don't want your young corners blowing assignments and giving up big plays. That's all obviously all part of it. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but anyone being honest can look at a team that's going to have this many first and second year players in the rotation and say, hey, okay, I think they're going to be okay. And I asked Marcus Freeman about this, and he's like, I'm not worried about those guys. I'm worried about the transfers who are in their first year in the system. Okay, even more so. Like, those are the things. Can they pick up can the newcomers to the starting lineup and the newcomers to the defense pick up the system fast enough to really be impactful when they get into some of those bigger moments in the opener, number one. But I'm not as worried about that in the opener because I think Texas A&M is going to have the same problem in game one. So that's not really an excuse, but more so, what about game 5 when you play Louisville? What about game, was it 9 when you play Florida State? What about game 12 against USC, who I think is going to be a very good football team this year? Those are the questions that I have in those moments. Can they limit the mistakes enough? Can they pick up the defense enough to play to their full potential? Can they stay healthy in the secondary? That's a big thing for me. I mean, look, they need Benjamin Morrison and Xavier Watts to be healthy. It's a must. I don't think this football team can be as good as they need to be if they lose one of those two guys. It's going to be tough. It's going to be really tough. So they got to stay healthy in the secondary. And then the final piece for me is, did I get the evaluations right? Did Notre Dame get the evaluations right? I mean, that's really the thing that you have to, if you're being honest with yourself, you have to ask yourself, because am I right about Drake Bowen? Am I right about Kingston Viliama-Asa? And when I say I mean also Notre Dame staff. Am I right about Josh Burnham? Is he really as good as I think he can be? Am I right about Boubacar Traore? Am I right about Christian Gray? Am I right about Adon Schuler in my Jaden Alsbury? I ranked these guys high. Notre Dame thought very highly of these guys. Yeah, they're playing well against their own team, but that doesn't mean we know that they're going to be good when they play other teams. And that's really what it boils down to when you're looking at yourself when you have a lot of younger players is, yeah, I think that guy is good, but I really need to see it. And so when I talk about, potentially stumbling blocks, what if I get it wrong? What if I got it wrong? What if Notre Dame got it wrong? What if Drake Bowen and Kingston and Jaden Alsbury aren't the talents that we thought they were? What if Armel Mukum's not that, and Boubacar and Josh Burnham aren't the talents that I thought they were? What if Jason Onye doesn't have the talent that I think he has? What if Kurt Donovan Heinisch isn't as talented as his brother, which I think that he is? What if Adon Schuler isn't athletic enough to hold up against the best receivers and best offenses in the country? What if I got those wrong? And so you always kind of have that in the back of your mind when you're talking about guys you haven't really seen a lot of. Like I had that thought about Benjamin Morrison. Like, what if I got this wrong before he played at Notre Dame? You hear good things, and you're like, yeah, but if I got it wrong, then they're gonna maybe be in a little bit of trouble at corner. And then fortunately, you find out in the open. I mean, it took one game to realize, yep, got that one right. With Benjamin Morrison, when you're watching him lock down Ohio State's receivers as a true freshman, you're like, yep, okay, got that one right. Yep, he's really good. When do we find that out? When does that get confirmed, or when does the concerns have some legs? And that's the thing I do like about the A&M game, because for those that in that regard, just not from an assignment correctness standpoint, not from a did they do their job, things like that, but from the standpoint of when I watched the Texas A&M game and I watched Drake Bowen run around against an SEC team, and I watched Kingston run around against an SEC team, and I watched Christian Gray run with their receivers, and I watch Armo Mulcom and Boubacar going against their offensive lineman, and Josh Burnham going up against their offensive lineman, and Adon Schuler coming down in the alley trying to tackle in space. When you see that, if you say, okay, they belong, or you say, he did not look as athletic against that team as I thought he was going to. The assignment correctness stuff, not worried about that. Like if Drake Bowen crashes the A gap and just blows up the guard, but he was supposed to be in the B gap and the running back runs for 30 yards. That does, I mean, it from a coaching standpoint, it bothers me from this. You got to correct it, but I can correct that. I can fix that as a coach. And if I can do it, I know Al Colton can do it, right? Max Bullock can do it. It's more of but if this guy's not athletic enough, or this guy's taking on guards and getting blasted because he's just not strong enough or good enough or athletic enough, this guy can't run with those guys. That's when you start getting concerned. And honestly, I don't know how you guys are, but I always kind of have that in the back of my mind when we're talking about guys you haven't really seen on that stage. What if I got it wrong? And so we're going to find that's the one nice thing of all the concerns that you have. That's the one thing that we're going to get answered in game one, because it's not about technique and assignment correctness. Is can you run athletically? Do you belong on that field, on that stage? Do you have what I think you have athletically? And that's what we're going to find out here very, 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 very soon. So I'm looking forward to seeing all of that. Very, very much looking forward to seeing all of that and seeing what this team is capable of. And so as we wrap up, here's kind of what it comes down to for me. I had some fun a couple weeks ago. We did our predictions for the season. I went 11-1. My answer is still the same. I'm at 11-1. I do not have anyone in college football going undefeated this year at the Power 4 level. That's not going to change. Does Notre Dame have the ability to go 12-0? Sure, they do, but it's hard to predict that, and they're capable of that. But this prediction was based off what I think they're going to do, not necessarily what they can do. Of course, they can go undefeated, but there's just things we have to learn about this football team. And as I said, the schedule I do think is challenging enough that I could see them, maybe stubbing their toe at some point in time. My expectation for them in regard to the postseason is still the same. If you're a 5 or a 6 seed, you got to win 2. If you're a 7 or later seed, you got to at least win 1 and be competitive in the quarters. That's the minimum expectation for this football team for me this season. And I talked about why I think they can achieve that and what are the things that could potentially keep from doing that. But my prediction is the same, is they need to get to the playoff and win at least 1. And if they're a 5 or a 6 seed, then they need to win 2 because you need to beat the ACC or the Big 12 champ. If you're a 5 or a 6 seed, you're most likely going to play one of those 2 teams. And if you got to beat those teams, that's the expectation. I can understand if Georgia's still just a little bit better than you, or another team's just a little bit better than you right now that's in the Big 10 of the SEC. I get that, but the ACC team shouldn't be, and the Big 12 team shouldn't be. What they do beyond that, it's going to come down to matchups. I don't know who those teams are going to be, but I do think this team, if things go right, this team has a chance to make a very deep run. They just have to avoid some of the pitfalls that I talked about in this show, which, injuries at key spots, maybe guys aren't as good as you hoped for, the O-line on offense, different things like that. So I'm excited about what this team is going to be. Very, very excited about what this team is going to be. So I hope you guys enjoyed that show. I'm going to be back tomorrow at 1 o'clock for a mailbag. So very much looking forward to that. And then, of course, next week we will kick off our coverage. I will announce what our coverage schedule is going to look like. I'm still putting some finishing touches on that tomorrow before the mailbag starts. So you guys will have an idea of what to expect and who to expect when we get into our in-season coverage for Irish Breakdown on our podcast and then, of course, on our YouTube channel. So you're definitely going to check that out as well. So I'm getting out of here, folks. Do me a favor, hit that like, hit that subscribe, hit the notification bell. If you've not done so, sign up for the message board at boards.irishbreakdown.com, folks. I promise you're not going to regret joining that board. It's a lot of fun, a lot of good football talk. Even the negative people are still presenting arguments for it. You can go back and forth and have some fun. And I think you guys will enjoy it. And, of course, once the season starts, you're going to get some really good breakdowns, some really good intel. I'm going to have a recruiting intel piece coming up here. Once I'm done, I'm going to go put a little recruiting intel piece on the 2026 DB that you're definitely want to check out as well. So you can find that at boards.irishbreakdown.com. You can find our normal site at irishbreakdown.com. That's where all of our free content goes. And, of course, subscribe to our podcast platform, whether it's Apple, Spotify, Google, however you listen to podcasts. Subscribe to our podcast platform. And as always, you can find us here on the Irish Breakdown podcast on YouTube. So definitely check that out as well. So you all have a great rest of your day. I'll see you tomorrow. Ivy Nation Sports Talk tonight at 5. Folks, we are 9 days away from Notre Dame kicking off the season and just 2 days away from college football coming back. I hope y'all are excited as I am. Be excited about this team, folks. There's good reason to be. Don't talk yourself into being negative and feeling bad. This is going to be a fun year. I really believe it. How fun? We'll find out. But this is going to be a fun football team to watch. And I know for one, I'm looking forward to watching it. So join me again soon here, folks, and have a great rest of your day on the Irish Breakdown podcast.